You know. And pledge allegiance first. Helen?
Put your hand over your heart and begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you. We got the last two back. Okay, roll call.
Director Robert, absent. Director Villain,
Here.
Director Avila,
Here.
Director Waters,
Here.
Director Queedy.
I'm here. We have a quorum. Thank you very much. And to public comments, do we have any public? We'll speak to.
Anyone from the public would like to comment, please use the raise hand feature now. We have two members of the public. There's no raised hands and there are no members of the public present. Everyone here is accounted for.
Okay, then we'll move on to a presentation.
Yes, so our first presentation tonight is an award that we have deemed, despite Director Avila's dislike of acronyms, the Award for Quick Action, or AQUA. And this is a new kind of, let's call it a spot award, kind of an as needed. Just felt like the circumstances surrounding what Trish is going to talk about here really merited some recognition, but I certainly see opportunities in the future where this award would be appropriate for various staff members here at Calleguas. So I'll let Tricia explain the details.
Right. So I feel lucky to get to kick off the meeting today with this award. It supports the general manager's vision to recognize team members' efforts that are decisive and quick to solve problems and remove roadblocks. So in our first presentation of the award, the recipient's actions did just that. In this case, a bee sting brought a severe allergic reaction to a coworker at a remote site. The injured employee needed immediate treatment and with coworker driving headed to the nearest emergency room. However, Nick Thompson could see his partner was not going to make it to the hospital and determined the best course of action was to make a detour to the nearest fire station where they were able to administer an injection of epinephrine to reverse the effects of the anaphylactic shock and call an ambulance. Thankfully, our story had a happy ending. And we just want to recognize Nick Thompson for his quick thinking today. And his family, the family of the affected employee is also really grateful for that. So the value of quick thinking is often overlooked, but I think the result this instant is clear as water that Nick deserves this recognition. So today we want to present you watch our appreciation.
Picture. Yeah, do a picture. You won't be able to see the pocket watch in the picture, but it's pretty cool.
Oh, very nice.
You want to,
We're gonna have your
They want
picture.
There too.
Yeah.
That's it.
Maybe it's me.
excited. Well, I want at least Nick to be in the middle. Ish.
What are you gonna?
You're taller. I'm on the short end.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Okay. Take a few. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
3B, call up Charlotte for this presentation.
Good evening, President Quady, directors, staff, and guests. As some of you may already know, Calleguas is losing a valued team member who has been part of the organization for 2.5 years. Maya Holcomb came to Calleguas as part of the Water Resources Department, where she worked on a variety of projects, including grant administration, groundwater reporting, and water use efficiency. And when the board adopted the strategic plan a year ago and the new model for resilience was born, Maya shifted her focus to include legislative advocacy. And a few months later, she became half of the newly formed External Affairs Department, where she has been an essential part of the new territory that the department has ventured into. From writing press releases to analyzing legislation to coordinating our regional advocacy group, Maya has risen to each new challenge with excellence and good humor. She has been my valued partner in all of our new endeavors and has earned the respect of colleagues, both inside Calleguas and beyond. Although Maya is leaving Calleguas for new adventures and opportunity, her mark on our organization will be lasting, and I look forward to seeing where she next takes her career. Maya, thank you for all of your contributions in helping our small but mighty department grow. I appreciate you and I'll miss you very much. And with that, I'd like to present to you a certificate acknowledging all of your hard work here. Maya. And just thank you very much for everything you've done.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you to the board president and the board of directors for reserving time tonight for this item. It's hard to believe that my time at Calleguas has come to an end. Over the past few years, I've had the pleasure of working with the most dedicated, knowledgeable, and passionate individuals in our field, and I'm truly grateful. First and foremost, I want to thank the board of directors for your unwavering commitment to both our community and our staff. To our GM and deputy GM, you have both led with integrity and passion, creating a collaborative and beneficial work environment for Calleguas staff members. You two have and will continue to set Calleguas apart from other water districts across the whole country. I'm deeply grateful for every opportunity I've received, and the guidance and lessons I've gained from both of you will stay with me throughout my career. And to my boss and manager of external affairs, Charlotte, thank you for being a mentor, a leader, and constant source of encouragement. Your trust in my abilities and guidance have made all the difference. I am leaving with a deep appreciation from all we've accomplished and the impact we've made on our community. I'm excited for your continued success for years to come. She's really the best in the business. Thank you. Thank you all once again for the opportunity to partake in such a meaningful organization. It has always been my dream to work for Calleguas, and I will look back with so much gratitude. I will miss working alongside all of you. Thank you so much.
Where are you going?
Can you share? North Carolina.
Oh,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You'll be missed.
Thank you.
You're doing another picture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Remember the family motto, runs in front. It's a new one to me.
Can't wait to tell my wife.
I guess because I'm not sure. Yeah, names. It would be the opposite way this would be. Like actually make some science.
Are we doing by height? We're switching it up this time. Oh, did it get in there?
Got everybody?
Well, someone needs to get in the middle because we have a gap.
I actually.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, good luck.
Thus ends the picture taking part of today's program.
I mean, I'm giving you a presentation. Wait a minute, why wasn't he in the picture?
He didn't get up to get into it. It should have been.
Photoshop.
Photoshop, there you go.
Okay, so we. So, thank you all.
Photoshop your wife.
Yes. You surely will be missed. Items to be added to the agenda, government code?
No items to be added.
Okay, on to the consent calendar. We can step through these items with any Q and A. Just approve the minutes. Any questions on the minutes?
I wasn't actually 20 minutes late, but
Want to correct?
Oh, no, it was because he wasn't in closed session.
I'll move approval.
Okay, well,
Let's go.
I'll do it all.
Oh, you want to do them?
I'm gonna step through, receive and affirm the payment register. Check through anybody else have questions? I just noted the interim audit, but other than that, everything looks kosher to me. Any questions there? Okay, so then we'll move on to the CD&E group, it's the salinity management pipeline.
Yeah, and Fernando will be joining us remotely to provide a presentation, providing an overview of the project.
Yes, good evening, Board of Directors. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm going to share my screen, so if you bear with me 1 second here. Okay. Hopefully you can see the presentation.
Yes.
Mhm.
Excellent. Let me just move around some items, get them out of the way. Excellent. Okay. Okay, so tonight for your consideration, I have a presentation. It's an overview of the salinity management pipeline phase 3. And I'll start with an overview, some history, the need for the salinity management pipeline. As you all well know, imported water supplies are becoming increasingly more expensive and less reliable. A potential source of additional water does exist, and this includes brackish groundwater and recycled potable reuse water as well. Both of these waters require treatment though, which generates a brine concentrate and therefore a mechanism for brine disposal. So salts in the watershed are increasing due to the applied imported water and agriculture use. Essentially, more salt comes into the watershed than goes out, building up salts over time. Regulations limit discharge of salt to local creeks, and wastewater treatment plants cannot meet the requirements. Additionally, TMDLs require that the salts issue be addressed. So the SMP to the rescue. The SMP increases water reliability by allowing salty groundwater to be used for municipal and expanded agriculture purposes and facilitating potable reuse. It reduces the salinity of local surface water and water by removing salt from the watershed. So what is the salinity management pipeline? Currently, it's a pipeline system composed of 18 miles of 18 to 48-inch diameter pipeline. The SMP collects brine concentrate from brackish groundwater desalting currently and potable reuse in the near future. The SMP collects excess tertiary treated wastewater effluent when there is insufficient demand for it. And the SMP conveys that water for safe disposal to the Pacific Ocean. Currently, it's permitted for a capacity of 19.1 million gallons per day and began operating back in 2014, so 10 years ago. So this map here shows in blue what is currently been constructed of the SMP. Additionally, we have constructed the outfall and the SMP control tank. And then these other 3 segments in green, purple, and red are future segments. And tonight's presentation addresses phase 3 of the SMP. So here's a closer look at the first half of the SMP phase 3. This is a pipeline that would extend from the intersection of Las Posas and Upland Road within the state of Camarillo. It would expand towards the east along Upland Road, making its way all the way to Santa Rosa Road. And this next map shows that second half. The SMP would continue along Santa Rosa Road into the Santa Rosa Valley, extending all the way to Hill Canyon Road, where it would terminate. So that's about 5.1 miles of mostly 24-inch diameter pipeline. So phase 3. Nope. Did I hear a question?
Nope.
Nope, we're all listening intently.
Excellent. So phase 3, we completed preliminary design report back in 2020. This is again composed of 5.1 miles long, mostly 24-inch diameter pipe. We did, during preliminary design, we worked with the city of Camarillo to get permission to use the Upland Road Bridge. They are the owners of that bridge. And in order to cross the Calleguas Creek and avoid having to tunnel underneath it, we found out that the bridge has an existing utility cell that is vacant and it's available for use. So we performed some structural analysis and went through the permitting process to acquire permission to use the utility cell, thus avoiding a more costly and riskier construction method, which would be trenchless construction below Calleguas Creek. We did avoid that trenchless construction, but there are other trenchless construction crossings that we will still need to perform as part of phase 3. Additionally, the Triunfo Las Virgenes JPA, Joint Powers Authority, recently requested a connection to the SMP. Just last night at their board meeting, the JPA authorized the general manager to sign the agreement to connect to the SMP. Now, we do not have SMP phase 3 constructed yet. So in order to serve the JPA, we would need to design and build SMP phase 3. Per Ordinance 19, the discharger, in this case, the Triunfo Las Virgenes JPA, is responsible for the design and construction costs of the SMP discharge station. So here's a drawing showing a typical cross-section of such a discharge station, basically composed of a vault structure housing a clay valve, isolation valves, a meter, mechanical components, and the connecting pipe to the SMP. So design of the SMP and discharge station would commence once a signed agreement and a deposit for, again, the design costs for the discharge station are received from the discharger. And again, this discharger would be connecting to the end of SMP 3 near the Santa Rosa and Hill Canyon Roads intersection. So tonight, for the board's consideration, staff recommends the following actions. The approval of the capital project budget allocation in the amount of $3,702,000. Approve professional services by Perliter Linglesby in the amount of $2,848,000. And approve the agreement for construction and use of the SMP service connection with Triunfo Las Virgenes Joint Powers Authority. And with that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Fernando. Any questions?
Curious, do we know what the expected total cost of the project is going to be to complete phase 3?
Yes, good question, Director Avila. We have a budgetary estimate that was recently updated. It'll be fine-tuned as we complete design, but right now in the ballpark of approximately $25 million for construction of phase 3.
Fernando, I had a question on the bridge where we had the access to not do French work instead of using the Upland Road Bridge. And
Yes.
I was just wondering, did we have to do any reinforcement for that bridge, or did we just go ahead and do it?
Great question. So as part of the permitting process during preliminary design, the city did require us to do a loading analysis of the bridge to determine if the bridge does have the additional capacity to take the load of a full pipe. And we determined that the bridge does have that additional capacity, but the city required that we implement some provisions in case there is a leak within the cell. We want to avoid having the cell fill up with water. So we will be, as part of the SMP phase 3, we would be cutting out some openings for drainage purposes, basically a graded opening at the lowest end of that utility cell. But no structural retrofits would be required.
And then, so once we get to the Santa Rosa and Hill Canyon roads, there it waits for the connection from the
That's correct, yes. So the brine pipeline that the Joint Powers Authority will be constructing will extend from their pure water plant and will be following Hill Canyon Road and connecting at that intersection. So our meter station will be constructed nearby this intersection.
We have right to build a vault on one of those locations there yet, or?
The public right of way is pretty wide through there. We actually have an existing turnout in the immediate vicinity, but also the property owner at that corner is the city of Thousand Oaks. They actually own that agricultural land. They lease it for agricultural use. That's right at the intersection of Hill Canyon and Santa Rosa. So we would, if we need to acquire right of way, we feel confident that we can work something out.
Yeah, that's convenient. Okay. How How far is Los Virgenes JPA running their pipe to meet with ours? Seems like it's a pretty long way.
Yeah, because
Yes,
there's sites on Agora, in Agora.
Yeah.
I believe it's approximately 14 miles. Yeah, I believe it's 10-inch diameter, 14 miles long.
Do we know which path they're taking? Are they going following the 101 down to?
They're following surface streets. Their location, their site is on Agora Road, so they'll follow that and probably come across Hampshire for a bit, and then there's kind of a side street through there. I can't remember its name, maybe Willow, and eventually end up on Hillcrest. And then if you know where the city's municipal service center is in Newbury Park, there's like a dirt road that goes down to Hill Canyon
Okay.
wastewater plant, and so they'll follow that alignment through there. So it's a long ways
Yes.
through some challenging construction areas.
Very.
None of our approved monies are going for the design and construction costs of the discharge station.
It's accounted for here, but they would pay for them.
That's correct.
All right. Good. Okay, any other questions of Fernando? Thank you, Fernando.
Excellent.
We'll go on to the all connected. Check in, any questions there? I just have one question. Just looking at is the 1.1 divided by 3?
That's the total cost for the 3 years.
Yeah, so roughly by 3, it's a little bit less because there's some escalation.
Good.
Did we go out? I know we had talked about going out to bid for something like this. Did we go out to bid for these services?
Yes, we did.
But let me clarify, we issued a request for proposals because this isn't a competitively bid situation, and they were evaluated both on cost and qualifications.
Okay.
The costs of the two that met the requirements were almost identical. It was like $62 or something.
$160.
It was like some ridiculously small differential between the
Wow,
two.
very, very close.
So
Yes.
we are definitely getting a very cost competitive
Okay.
price for these services.
Any other questions? And motion on the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion's been first and seconded. Roll call vote.
Director Robert absent. Director McMillan,
Yes.
Director Avila,
Aye.
Director Waters,
Aye.
Director Clady.
Aye. Carried. Thank you all. On to action items. We have,
Got a presentation for this one too?
okay, and raise hands, right? So we're gonna go ahead with the presentation.
We can take well, do you want to take public comment now?
Was wondering about the raised hand, so there's no public comment.
Anyone from the public would like to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature. There are no raised hands.
Go then. Presentation.
Hey, good evening, directors. I am going to follow on Fernando's presentation and continue talking about the salinity management pipeline. But for this action item, we are looking at the California Environmental Quality Act process and the final environmental impact report that is before your board tonight. So we don't have a lot of CEQA documents that we produce at the district. And so this may be the first one that some of you have seen. So I'm also going to walk through a little bit about what CEQA is, what the requirements are, and then talk specifically about the environmental impact report that was prepared for this project. So yeah, I'll introduce the proposed project, give you an overview of CEQA, summarize what the environmental review process and analysis found, and then also summarize the actions that are before the board tonight. So Fernando talked about phase 3 of the salinity management pipeline, and we actually analyzed both phases 3 and 4 as the proposed project for this CEQA clearance. And that's because we had enough information and preliminary design to do both phases. And so they are both captured in the environmental impact report. I won't spend too much time on this because Fernando gave a great overview of the existing salinity management pipeline and the need for it. We currently have 18 miles of it. And this proposed project, these two phases, would extend the salinity management pipeline a total of about 14 miles inland between the two phases. So this is just a quick summary comparing phases 3 and 4. Again, these phases would not be constructed concurrently, but we are analyzing them because at this time we have equivalent amount of detail for both. And again, just an overview map showing the existing salinity management pipeline in red with phase 3 connecting to the existing pipeline shown in purple there. And then phase 4 would pick up where phase 3 ends and would extend into Western Simi Valley right around Madera and Tierra Rajada roads. And this is a little bit more of a zoomed in view of that. So collectively, these two phases are our proposed project for CEQA. So what is CEQA? It is the California Environmental Quality Act is a public disclosure and input process. And its intent is to inform government decision makers, such as yourself, as well as the public about the potential environmental effects of proposed activities and to prevent or minimize significant environmental damage. And under CEQA, you have to analyze your project according to a whole suite of different environmental issue areas. I won't read them all to you, but they are listed here. And so you kind of go stepwise through these different environmental issue areas and identify what the impacts of a particular project are going to be. And if those impacts are significant, then you also need to propose mitigation measures that would reduce or avoid those impacts. So the CEQA process has two main phases of public review. The first one being called scoping. And so we started our scoping process by issuing a notice of preparation. So it's noticing the public that we're going to prepare an environmental impact report. And alongside that, we also circulated an initial study, which is kind of a first pass through the environmental impacts of a proposed project. And it's a checklist. And in the initial study, we actually screened out several of the issue areas where there would be no impact or very minimal impacts, so that our environmental impact report that we prepared would focus in detail on just those issue areas that would have significant impacts. So we started with the scoping. We solicited comment from public agencies as well as the general public on what should be included in the EIR, the scope of the impacts, if there's anything the public is aware of that we should be addressing. And then that's out for 30 days. Once we have those comments in, then we begin preparing the draft EIR. And I'm saying EIR, you'll see it says SEIR. We prepared a special type of EIR for this project, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The second phase is where you have prepared your draft EIR, you put it out for public review. That review period's 45 days. And at that time, public agencies and the general public have another opportunity to comment, this time commenting on your analysis and your mitigation measures. And then once you receive your comments on your draft EIR, then you prepare the final EIR, which is the draft EIR, any comments received on it and your responses to those comments, plus any revisions to the draft EIR that were required. And then the last phase is where we prepare the required CEQA findings and the board meeting at which Calleguas adopts the EIR and findings. That's where we are tonight. And the very last step would be filing a notice of determination with the county clerk, which would happen if the EIR is certified tonight. And that would be the final filing for the CEQA process. So this process has been going on for a while. Another aspect of CEQA is that we are required to do government-to-government tribal consultation with interested tribes in the area. And so we initiated that tribal consultation in December of 2022, and we had 2 tribes that were interested in consulting on the project with us. That is again, a government-to-government process. It is also a confidential process because it relates to tribal cultural resources. So we conduct that process before we even release a draft EIR to the public, because that draft EIR needs to incorporate the results of our consultation, which typically focus on the strategies for mitigation for particular impacts. We consult with the tribe to have them let us know if there's any tribal cultural resources of concern. And if there are, or a potential to encounter them, we work with the tribes to develop mitigation that everybody is happy with, and then we incorporate that into the draft EIR. So that is why that started so much earlier than the rest of the public review process. So our scoping period was February 21st through March 23rd. And during that time, we held a public meeting at the Santa Rosa Technology Magnet School, which is right along the route on Santa Rosa Road. That was on March 2nd, and we had no members of the public attend that meeting. Our draft EIR review period was May 13th through June 27th of this year. So CEQA environmental analysis. Here's where we talk about why I'm saying EIR, SEIR. There was originally an environmental impact report that was done for the salinity management pipeline back in 2002 when the whole project was first being developed. And that EIR was a program EIR, which is typically done when you have a large scale project that's going to be built out in phases and you don't have enough information about future phases at this point to do a project level analysis, but you do a general programmatic analysis, and then future phases would do their own project specific analysis that kind of tears off that main document that was done prior. So that's what we did here. We did a subsequent environmental impact report. So that focuses just on phases 3 and 4. And then we incorporated by reference the programmatic EIR that included kind of the big picture of what the salinity management pipeline is. So again, we had done an initial study way back in the beginning to focus on which issue areas we were going to carry forward to the draft EIR. And that initial study found that for all of these issue areas listed here, the project would have less than significant impacts. And so we were able to document that in the initial study. That became part of the attachments to the draft EIR. And that initial study also found that these 6 issue areas, biological resources, cultural resources, geology and soil, specifically paleontological resources, noise, transportation, traffic, and tribal cultural resources. Those were the ones that had the potential for significant impacts and then were pushed forward to more detailed review in the EIR. So EIRs follow a particular structure. There's a introduction and executive summary. There's a detailed project description. And then for each issue area, there's a setting, impacts are described. And then for any impacts that are found to be significant, mitigation is proposed. You also have to develop and analyze alternatives to the proposed project that would minimize or avoid one or more significant impacts of a proposed project. So we have an alternatives chapter, and then there are other impacts that are required to be analyzed under CEQA, such as cumulative impacts, whether the project would induce growth, things like that. So the results we found that there would be significant impacts that could be mitigated to a less than significant level in biological resources, cultural resources, geology and soils, paleo, and tribal cultural resources. All of those were mitigable to less than significant. We did find that there would be one significant and unavoidable impact, and that would specifically be nighttime construction noise. If we are required to do nighttime construction, and if we are required to do it near residences, we found that that would be significant and unavoidable, though temporary, even with the implementation of all feasible mitigation, noise reduction, things like that. Construction is noisy in the middle of the night. You can do what you can to try to minimize it, but if you're right up next to houses, that would be significant and unavoidable. So that is kind of a conservative call because at this time, we don't know that that's going to happen. Typically, those situations come about after we, kind of work through our traffic permitting and things like that with the local jurisdictions. And they want construction to avoid the peak hours in roadways. And so that leaves certain activities to have to be done sometimes at night. So we did develop 3 alternatives as well that we assessed in the draft SEIR. The first alternative is the no project alternative, which is a CEQA requirement. You have to look at what would be the environmental impacts if you did not build your project. Alternatives 2 and 3 were alignment alternatives that were developed to reduce traffic along certain major roadways within those phases. Those reroutes would both go through agricultural lands that are adjacent to the public right of way. So though they would lessen traffic impacts, we still found that the proposed project would be the environmentally superior alternative. Because first of all, it meets all the project objectives, which the no project alternative does not. And secondly, although it would reduce some temporary traffic impacts during construction, for each of those 2 alternatives, it would reduce, or there would be more impacts for biological resources, agricultural resources, and then cultural and tribal cultural resources, because you would be rerouting this trenching off into undeveloped areas instead of within the public right of way where these issues aren't as prevalent or they don't exist at all. And also it was found that the traffic impacts for the proposed project turned out to be less than significant. So they wouldn't even reduce a significant impact down to a less than significant level. So when the draft SEIR was out for public review, we received 2 comment letters. One was from Caltrans and one was from Ventura County Public Works Roads and Transportation Department. Both letters summarized the required permits that fall under each jurisdiction. And they both requested construction management plans or traffic management plans. Those are all things that we do anyway in our project traffic control plans, so that would be covered. The county public works also reiterated, summarized their requirements for post-construction pavement, rehabilitation and repair, as well as they recommended that project construction occur during off-peak hours. So all of this was pretty standard commentary on the EIR, and none of the comments we received required us to do any revision to the draft EIR. So the final EIR was prepared, and that includes the full text of the draft, as well as a minor revision to the draft SEIR project description that we made ourselves to provide additional detail about that SMP tie-in that Fernando just talked about in the last item. So between the time that we wrote the draft EIR and the final EIR, we got a little more detail on what that would look like. So we just added that, but it didn't affect the analysis in any way. It just provided a little bit more detail and disclosure in the PD. And then the final EIR also includes comments received on the draft, as well as our written responses to those comments. So the actions before the board tonight contained within resolution number 2096 are first to certify the final SEIR, which of course is that whole package of the documents prepared under CEQA. It makes findings for each significant impact. So those findings are either that mitigation measures are feasible and required, and when implemented, that impact is reduced to a less than significant level, or a finding that mitigation measures are required, but the impact cannot be reduced to a less than significant level. So that's that significant and unavoidable impact related to nighttime construction noise. So because we have a significant and unavoidable impact, the board would also need to adopt a statement of overriding considerations, which essentially says that any environmental detriment caused by the project has been minimized to the extent feasible, and any incremental remaining impact would be outweighed by the benefit of the project. The resolution also includes adoption of the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which consolidates all the required mitigation measures into this program, which can then be taken, and there's a checklist as these measures are implemented during construction, or when they're applicable, it can be checked off that they are complete. And it's also kind of spells out when and by whom each measure is responsible to be implemented. And then lastly, the resolution also directs staff to file the notice of determination with the county clerk, notifying that the environmental impact report has been certified, and again, concluding the CEQA process. And that notice of determination must be filed within 5 days of the board action. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Question?
Yeah, I'm curious. We're doing this for phase 3 and phase 4. Is there a, what's the word I'm looking for? How long is this report good for? Will California require us to create a new report, say 5-10 years down the line if we don't go forward with phase 4?
No, there's not a specific time frame. There are certain triggers that would require a new environmental analysis if some substantial change in the environmental setting were to occur, or if we decided that instead of going up this route, we want to actually take it around this way. So if there's some major change to either the project or the setting around it, then that would warrant new CEQA analysis. But if everything is pretty much the same and we decide to move forward with it 3 years from now, that CEQA clearance will still be valid.
Okay, great.
Questions? I had Director McMillan, yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so when we pass this tonight, is there a public thing, or did you already do the public thing earlier on? That was already hashed out earlier on.
That was the call for public comment before the presentation.
Okay, and then what's the other thing? Is it on the sound mitigation thing? It seems like we've done this in the past where we put like big soundboards and stuff. Is that kind of what happens?
Yes. Because each situation is unique, we kind of have a plan that says, here's all of the tools in our toolbox that we could implement or that the contractor could implement. And then depending on the specifics of the site, they would implement what makes the most sense to reduce the noise to the extent possible. And, if it turns out that we don't end up having to do nighttime construction near residences, a lot of the alignment is out in ag fields and not close to sensitive receptors. So if that's the case, then, that might not even need to happen. But yeah, we try not to be too prescriptive in that sense, because then we want to make sure that we have all the tools available to us to adapt to any particular situation. So we kind of say, here's all of the things. And then if there's something else that's even better, we can use that as well.
And what we do in practice and the specifications is we translate that into a numerical limit, and at a certain point, but usually at a property line of the nearest sensitive receptor. And then the contractor has to submit a plan demonstrating how they're going to achieve that, which could be because depending on what equipment they're using, could be louder or not less loud. Sometimes that could be sound walls. There's other mitigation measures available as well. And then we require that they monitor it to prove that they've achieved that.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Mhm.
I just thought of this, going back to our Lost Virgins, and this question might be for Fernando. Going back to our interconnection with LV and the high water table, have we checked how high the water table is at this location?
That's a Fernando
Director Aguilar,
question.
great question. So as part of the design, it includes geotechnical investigations. We will be doing some soil testing that includes some borings to determine soil conditions. And if we do encounter groundwater as part of those soil investigations, we will include groundwater disposal requirements, as well as procuring a construction dewatering permit during design.
Great, yeah, better to get ahead of it than have to deal with it after the fact.
Agreed.
Okay, and then I may have asked this before on a prior one, but I find it amazing that you, and I think you said before that you have these people on a list, but to find a qualified professional paleontologist defined by the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology.
It's a niche.
We already have it. We already have those guys, right? Okay.
We haven't dealt with paleontological resources nearly as much as we've dealt with archaeological and tribal cultural resources, but there are people who exist who this is their job.
Yeah, in the environmental consulting field, the consultants that typically assist agencies with preparing these big documents and have all the resource area specialists to do the actual analysis, because I couldn't do an air quality analysis. That takes a specialized engineer. They have all of that expertise in-house, or they have sub-agreements. And so definitely those are things that can be found because it's required. And the reason we have that requirement on this project is because not that we have found anything, but because we go through soil types that have a higher likelihood of encountering paleontological resources. So where the alignment crosses those soil types, that person would monitor. And again, anybody else who's digging is going to need a monitor like that too. So there is a market for it.
They did find a big mammoth out in Moore Park years ago. Yeah, it was like a big, significant find.
It wouldn't be phase 3, it would be mammoth phase.
Wasn't on your property, was it? Have it in the barn. The barn mammoth.
You guys didn't dig out, see all that well.
Okay. Motion on the action item be warranted.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been first and seconded. Roll call vote.
Director Robert, absent. Director McMillan? Yes. Director Avila?
Aye.
Director Waters?
Aye.
Director Fady?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, on to reports and on to the monthly status report. So we'll go through and ask questions here. Questions on the water policy thing, just maybe it's just a comment, but it sounds surreal that the Metropolitan has been awarded a $99 million grant. And yet Pure Water has not been approved as a project. Currently identified the source of approximately the 3-to-1 matching, which was $298 million.
That's been a fun discussion at the board. It's mostly just for the design of the project, not for any part of the construction. And that was one thing that we really wanted to nail down, because I don't think we have to give it back if it's just for the design. Now, am I correct?
I'm going to let Henry answer these questions because he is better versed in the details of this.
Yeah, Henry Gromlich, Executive Strategist. Director McMillan, you are correct. And one of the good parts about what Metropolitan staff is doing is they're going into the negotiations with the Bureau of Reclamation being very forthright that they are going to be using this for planning and design, and that there's no commitment to the Bureau to complete the project if the board of directors decides this is not the right project for Metropolitan. Similarly, they're working to negotiate that they don't take that $99 million all in one chunk, but rather they take it as available to match the cash flow that is currently available at Met to meet the 3-to-1 match.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions about that?
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Henry.
Any other questions? And let's see.
Treatment. Cost recovery.
Yeah, I want to get an update on that too. The treatment cost
Yes.
recovery?
We had another workshop and we're making good progress. One of the most important things that we seem to have consensus on is that the treated water capacity at Metropolitan is not just a treated water commodity benefit, but is a larger regional benefit for Metropolitan because the treated capacity allows Met to shift from Colorado to State Water Project to Colorado, depending on the amount of State Water Project that's available. So at times when there's a lot of State Water Project water available, they're able to feed more of their system with State Water Project water, which results in stored water in Lake Mead, which then comes back as untreated water, but also helps provide a regional benefit. That regional benefit was calculated, I believe, at 23% of the overall treated water costs. And it is proposed to spread that among all member agencies that would benefit from that. That overall will reduce the amount of the treated water cost that is allocated to those users of treated water like Calleguas. And then also we're making good progress on trying to capture what the different aspects of treated water costs should be allocated to, both just the commodity rate, but also the capacity and peaking rate. And we looked at several alternatives, and Dan, our finance manager, and the general manager and I met, I guess it was yesterday, and reviewed the alternatives. And there are alternatives that are both rational and also alternatives that will reduce the costs that we currently bear, because that rationality more equitably allocates the cost of the benefit. So I think we're making good progress on that, and I'll be happy to answer any other
A
questions.
significant reduction or just it's helpful?
I'd say it's significant. I mean, it's a good 10%, maybe 12% reduction from what I can.
It's better than we were hoping for.
And our focus is really on what makes sense, what's fair to all of the member agencies. And not that it doesn't matter what to the extent it benefits Calleguas, but really want to make sure that we're advocating for a system that is logical and sensible and allocates costs appropriately, and not focus too much on exactly how much it benefits us, because I think that's how we got it into this problem to begin with.
Good. Good work.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Henry. General affairs? Any questions there? Stay have a seat, a lot of activity.
And Christine did a great job at the Aqua Region 8 event.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That was the most fun.
Recognize her board members, but that was all right.
I was having so much fun.
Anybody else was either?
No, Nina did. Nina from Foothill did. Nice.
Putting food over her board, and I'm sitting there going,
Good session. State advocacy. Partnerships. I just have highlights in here. I don't have questions on water resources. 16, that's the other Jennifer, huh?
We call her Jen to make it a little easier on us.
Jen?
When will we get another update on the district website? Redoing?
We're not quite at a milestone yet where we could bring it back, but we're working on it. It's a lot of information.
Okay.
Bring it in, but yes, we definitely are making progress and hope to get another update soon.
Okay, thank you.
Water use efficiency and conservation. Upcoming events. See the Jackie Irwin thing on September 14th. So,
Are we gonna have a booth? She said invite us to be.
Yeah, there's.
Okay, good.
water resource development. It's on number 27. This one. Is there an update on the ocean well application for a USBR Water Smart grant?
So the application itself is due later this year, and they were putting together a feasibility light study, as they called it, and we have say we, but it's really Christine. Had a couple comments on the light study, and have gone
Couple hundred. My comments were expensive.
Yeah, they were extensive comments. So they're reviewing those comments, and they're gonna present an updated feasibility light study to accompany their grant. So Ocean Well is putting the grant together essentially on Las Virgenes's behalf, because Ocean Well is a private enterprise, can't submit the application to the Bureau. So Las Virgenes is the non-federal partner for the Water Smart grant, and Ocean Well is doing all the work, and Christine is doing all the QA/QC so far. So we're gonna see another draft sometime this month. We have our meeting the fourth Thursday of every month, following our purveyor meeting in the afternoon. And that will be the next update, will be September, whatever, fourth Thursday in September.
Thank you.
Great.
Groundwater resources. Community. Engineering.
I have a question on 37 under design, the Simi Valley tanks. I see that we were finally able to get on the property and door survey. Anything else to add?
No, ultimately, we didn't have to take legal action. The property owner, we were able to work it out. I think simply that possibility was sufficient to motivate. So now that was kind of the roadblock. Now that they've been able to get on site and do the geotech and the surveying, and I believe last month, Fernando, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they did the investigations that were SEQA related. So like cultural resources and biological resources. So now we're moving.
Okay. Any other update besides that? Is it moving along, tracking?
Getting these pieces of information was really critical in order both to proceed with the SEQA as well as proceed with the design.
Okay.
Fernando's nodding, so I got it right.
That is correct. Yeah. So now that we have that information, we can proceed with the foundation design, which was held back since we didn't have that information. So we have all the information that we need to continue with finalizing the design.
Are we going to attempt to purchase the property before doing all the design work?
We're gonna figure out what the best timing is for that. I think we need to, it's been a while, so we have to update our appraisal before we make an offer, but I would propose that we probably do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I'll have.
Okay. It's the municipal leak detection, 2000. Grants and funding opportunities. guess this is 52. Any guesses on completion for the evaluation from DWR?
This issue has now had its first anniversary, so no. There's some challenging, I think, politics at play. And Henry and I were actually discussing this afternoon how we might shake this loose so that we can finally resolve this.
Operations and maintenance. AT&T has got attention again.
Talk about operations and maintenance. Is anybody filling in for Rob yet?
Well, what we've done is the responsibilities have been divvied up between Ian and Trisha in the
Okay,
interim.
great. Yeah.
So that's how we're handling it in the interim, but we're interviewing candidates next week. So
Wow.
we will have a new manager on soon.
I know that's the subject of 69, because I was going to ask the same thing. How many people have we pegged for interviews? Do we know? Are you still? Oh, 8, good.
How many internal?
2.
Good.
We had 34 applicants.
I think we had 34 applications, but there were only 31 applicants.
That it hit.
Somebody applied many times. Oh, no.
But about a third of them were really strong. We're interviewing
Wow.
8, so it's a great pool.
Mostly local or?
Mostly local. There were applicants from out of the area, but a lot of them.
I think everyone we're interviewing is California based.
Yeah. Any from our purveyors?
I'd prefer not to answer that question.
Will we be hearing about it at the purveyor meeting? That's what I'm wondering.
Depends how it goes next week.
Yep.
Got it.
There's a war out there. See, under human resources and risk management. Director McMillan already mentioned 69.
Yeah, I guess Cam Rosa's is snagging our people
Yeah.
now too, since we snagged theirs. It's payback.
I think we still have the better end of the deal so far.
Pretty
Who's on
good.
the cameras?
One of the instrumentation and control techs.
Okay, risk man-
Oh, the cornhole throwdown. How'd that go?
I proved that I'm really terrible at cornhole.
We can have them here next week for another photo.
risk management. See lessons learned. Says, see allergic right up. $83 sounds interesting, but I have no question.
At the moment, everyone's been waiting for it. Okay. This. Maybe.
Start the video again. Hang on, Ian. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Good evening, directors. It's my pleasure, honestly, to provide this summary of the costs, benefits, and assumptions of the Delta Conveyance Project, especially as outlined in the Berkeley Research Group's benefit cost analysis of the Delta Conveyance project, also getting some information out of the most recent biennial State Water Project Delivery Capability Report. This is one of those topics, and this is one of the reports that's been floating around for months, and people are talking about it. Your board has gotten presentations about it, and doing a presentation on it was the best way for me to really dig in and understand it. So there are the benefit cost analysis has an executive summary. It's got a bunch of appendices. Appendix B has a bunch of formulas that have not only letters in the math formula, but Greek letters in the math formula. This presentation is more towards the executive summary level than the Appendix B level. But if you have Appendix B questions, Dan's here. He can answer them. So speaking of executive summaries, kind of an overview of the State Water Project area. So as you know, there are 29 state water contractors across the state. The State Water Project area provides water to 27 million Californians. Businesses in that service area produce $2.3 trillion a year, goods and services, which makes up more than half of California's GDP. There's talk about how California is the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world on its own. The State Water Project service area within California is the 8th largest economy, would be the 8th largest economy in the world on its own. So keeping water flowing to that economic engine seems to me to be in the best interest of the state as a whole, but apparently that's up for debate. Changing weather patterns also impact the State Water Project operations. So, and what I mean by changing weather patterns, get into a little bit more detail about this throughout the presentation, is these extremes that we're seeing, extreme dries, extreme wets that are getting worse. The phrase du jour is weather whiplash, what we've seen over the last 8 years, from drought in 14 to 16 to record-breaking snowfall in 17, 18 to record-breaking drought to even more record-breaking wets the last 2 years. The preponderance of climate modelers anticipate that extreme pendulum swinging getting worse, and that impacts the ability of the State Water Project as it's currently built to operate the way that it was built to operate. It was built under assumptions of the mid-20th century hydrology, which as we go into the 21st century, quarter of our way into that century, we're not seeing as much anymore. So things are different. And there's also the risk of seismic disruptions, which are exacerbated by the increase in sea levels associated with the last risk of climate change. So grab my notes. Make sure I don't miss anything critical. So this slide demonstrates, I think this is a good roll-up of what the advantages of the Delta Conveyance Project are. So on the left, this is State Water Project deliveries looking between now and 2070 without the Delta Conveyance Project. That 2.5 million or 2,500,000 acre feet, 2.5 million acre feet a year you see on the left bar is the average State Water Project deliveries. That's out of a maximum of 4.17 million acre feet. So the max table A contracted deliveries is 4.1, but we see 2.56 on average. Doing nothing between now and 27, you see a reduction of 570,000 acre feet a year. So it's about a 20% reduction. What the DCP does is increases that back up 403,000 acre feet. So a lot of people are talking about the DCP in terms of it being an insurance policy that helps stave off further reliability decay. Because between now and 2070, let alone between the end of the project life, which they're modeling now as 2145. The anticipation is that the climate's going to get worse, and because of that, sea level rise, we will have less and less water coming out of the Delta for south of Delta deliveries. And what the DCP does is really buys us some decades of climate change adaptation and brings operations in 2070 a little bit closer to what they are today. So a little bit less bad in the future. So the climate change that I talked about is climate change impacts and seismic risk. This is described throughout the document as the cost of inaction. So the cost of doing nothing. And the water supply reliability is a phrase that I'll use because that's what they use in the Berkeley Research Group document. Those are really the project benefits. So there's two kind of sets of numbers in the document kind of floating around about the project itself that I just wanted to talk through. There's discounted and undiscounted dollars. In the undiscounted dollars, there's $33.8 billion worth of benefits and $20.1 billion worth of costs. The $20.1 billion is the number that you hear a lot, but it is not the number that they use in the document to calculate the benefit cost ratio. In the document, they use discounted present value dollars. The best way to describe this, I heard from our manager of finance, which is that you need $17.26 billion today to pay the $20.1 billion construction cost in 2029. So that's what the discounting is. So they use the present value costs, that second set of bullets, to come up with this 2.2 benefit cost ratio. The 2.2 benefit cost ratio is what it sounds like, that for every dollar you spend, you get $2.20 back in benefits. So I wanted to put these two numbers up, two sets of numbers up here, because you hear the $20.1 billion price tag and you hear the 2.20 benefit cost ratio. But as you'll hear throughout this presentation, the math is complicated and the math on these is a little complicated too. But the bottom line, which I'll repeat a couple times throughout, is that however you calculate it, even if you look at the top line and use the undiscounted dollars, the benefits are always at least a factor of 1.5 for. So the benefits described in the document are urban water supply reliability, agricultural water supply, water quality, seismic reliability. The costs are construction and related expenditures, operations and maintenance, and remaining environmental impacts after mitigation, which Jennifer talked about before. There will be, in her presentation, there will be a statement of overriding concerns at the end of this environmental process for state. The timeline is that we're in the middle of permitting, towards the end of permitting, hopefully. Spend a few years wrapping up planning and design. They anticipate this being a design build project. So 29 to 44, that 15-year period will be finishing design and starting construction. And then there's a 100-year project scenario, 2045 to 2145. So I talked through some of the benefits and costs. This table up here, the main takeaway is that the biggest benefit goes to urban water supply and reliability. And as Metropolitan makes up 46% of Table A deliveries, so the Table A contracts, a lot of that urban water supply and reliability is a benefit to Metropolitan. And the preponderance of costs are in construction. So that's a lot of what walking through the document focuses on. The framework for analysis briefly, again, this is more towards the executive summary than Appendix P, but the reason for the present value pricing is that it reduces potential distorting effects of inflation. So the idea to look over the cost of over the course of the project, especially construction, when you're incurring the costs and the benefits start accruing, that inflation won't have as big of an effect. They use a real discount rate that accounts for the time value of money over that 15-year construction period and 100-year operational life cycle. This approach is consistent with federal, state, and general academic literature principles and analysis of water-related investments. And the idea is that the benefits, and part of the reason that inflation won't affect benefits or cost ratio differently is because the benefits, which are tied to water rates, and the costs, which are tied primarily to construction, usually move in tandem. So they go up and down more or less together. So if one's affected, the benefit side is affected, the cost should be affected in ratio. Some of the climate assumptions. This considers changes in precipitation and runoff using a median climate change projections based on an ensemble of global climate models. So this ensemble was chosen by the Department of Water Resources Climate Change Technical Advisory Group, which was a mix of university reps from like Davis and Scripps, from consultancies and water programs across the West, including Colorado and Nevada, and some California water agencies. And they're really looking at three things. So the mean annual stream flow, so how much water is flowing in Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers through the Delta, a coefficient of variation of stream flow. And that's really, if you think about California, these extremes that I was talking about before, if we have 7 atmospheric rivers one winter, it's a boom winter. If we have 3, we may not even get up to average rainfall. And so how much the variation, the stream flow can vary is important in calculating what the impact of continuing or exacerbated extremes will be on how much water is available to take out of the Delta for export down south. And then average annual temperature, which impacts stream flow because the more precipitation that falls as rain instead of snow means we get more stream flow earlier in the year, which makes it harder to divert over the course of the spring and summer. We get flashier storms in the winter, which makes it tougher to store that water. The earlier that runoff comes, the harder it is to capture it because you don't know how much space you're going to have to leave in the reservoir to capture further storms. Deliveries, so I put this in here, they talk about calcium 3. My point of this is that calcium 3 is the same, it's the same model that the state and feds use for the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. So there's just they're trying to maintain, the Berkeley Research Group that did their document is trying to maintain an apples to apples comparison. It assumes 1.8 feet of sea level rise by 2070, which this ensemble of global climate models predicts has a 66% likelihood of occurring. So there's a pretty good chance the sea is going to rise almost 2 feet by 2070. This 2070 number represents, in the author's opinion, and in mine and Dan's, we talked about this also, a kind of conservatism in terms of the analysis of the impacts. Because as I said before, everyone assumes, everyone in this area who's doing the climate modeling, the general assumption is that the climate is going to continue to change and these extremes are going to continue to exacerbate. And if we're on an exacerbation trajectory, things would be worse by 2100, worse still by 2145. So 2070 is about a third of the way into the operational life cycle of the DCP. And so assuming benefits based on kind of a third as bad as things might get is conservative compared to if they had modeled it at 2145. So benefit 1, the big benefit, that's 33 of the $37 billion of benefits. DCP will increase reliability by reducing the frequency and magnitude of shortages during dry periods during the 100-year operational span. So they went through and looked at levels of demand and price sensitivity for a bunch of different customer classes in every one of the state water contractor service areas. And for Metropolitan, they looked at Metropolitan's IRP, which includes information from all of Metropolitan's member agencies, including Calleguas. So they kind of looked at all of urban water management plans and Metropolitan's IRP as a kind of bottom-up analysis of what demands would be between now and 2045, which is as far as the urban water management plan goes. They did not assume any growth after 2045 because there was really no credible way to do that. There's no overall planning documents for all of the water agencies in the entire service area that predict growth past 2045. And they also consider that a kind of conservatism also. Because in terms of the benefits, because the more people there are, the greater the shortage, the cost of the shortage is, and then therefore the greater the benefit of avoiding those costs. So if they had assumed a bunch of growth, the benefits of DCP might have been larger, likely would have been larger than they were. So future water shortages for each customer type were assumed to be between 0 and 32%. It's based on recent historical shortage impacts. The idea is that without the DCP, in that 100-year period, there would be shortages somewhere between 0 and 32% shortage, 61% of the time. With the DCP, that shortage number gets reduced to 41% of the time. So and so then they take the economic cost of each of those shortages, they estimate that, add the difference between the cost of shortages with and without the DCP, and that difference is considered the reliability benefit. So again, you're seeing it's not that the DCP is going to get rid of all our problems forever in the future. It's that the idea is that this investment will keep the decay of reliability on the current system from getting as bad as it would be without it. And it would be incumbent upon other water suppliers to look at this number and think, okay, well, that's going to be our new reality. What are we going to do? And what Calleguas is doing is the RIST program, our own kind of integrated regional water resource planning process. Benefit 2 is agricultural water supply, 2.3 billion. So a little bit less than 10% of the total benefit kind of package. The average additional deliveries to agricultural state water contractors is 148,000, a little bit more than 148,000 acre feet a year. So what the authors did was they took that number and they averaged the marginal value of that water, multiplied it over the 148. Again, this math is complicated, over the course of the project, and got $2.3 billion over the life of the project. What agricultural water users can do is with this water is up to them, right? But there's additional benefits to grow crops, to recharge or offset deficits of groundwater, or to sell to other users. So water quality benefits. DCP is expected to reduce salinity in delivered water by 22 milligrams per liter over a no project scenario. So if you think about it right now, water goes from Sacramento through the Delta. And as it's going through the Delta, it picks up salt from various sources, both from tidal interaction with the coast and just all of the habitat that it passes through before it gets to the pumps down south. This will take the water from the Sacramento River where it's clear and avoid all of that salinization on its way to the New Bethany pumping plants in the south. If you are from the Delta's perspective, that Sacramento River water is dilution water. So if you take that dilution water out, there will be salinity impacts in the Delta. So while the water delivered through the tunnel will be less salty, the water that stays behind in the Delta will be a little bit more salty. That cost of that is included in the cost of the project. So they didn't forget that number. So the urban benefits of improved water quality, I put this up here, not that I anticipate that anyone in this room is intimately familiar with the salinity economic impact model developed by the Bureau of Reclamation. But again, this is just an apples to apples comparison. The state and the Bureau, Metropolitan and the Bureau developed this model to investigate the impacts of salinity from the Colorado River on Southern California. So the Berkeley Research Group imported that analysis for use here. And ag water quality improvements, I was listening, there was a little bit of talk about this right before the meeting. There are the less salty the water, the less leaching or flushing that certain ag operators have to engage in on their properties, depending on what they're growing, what the salt tolerance of those crops is. So using a UC Davis model, the authors went through really on a parcel by parcel basis and determined, will there be a benefit to this parcel based on what they've historically grown if their water is a little bit less salty? If yes, they added that benefit into this. If no, they didn't add the benefit. So benefit 4, seismic reliability, almost $1 billion. One of the things that you can't see from this photograph, but you know if you have been up there, is that that land, that agricultural land within those sandy ribbons of levee is somewhere on average between 10 and 40 feet below the bottom of the river. So when you have a earthquake, if one has an earthquake, I'm knocking on wood for those online that can't see, and one of those levees breaks, you have issues, right? So this is an oldie but a goodie. If you have an earthquake event in the Delta, it doesn't even have to be of huge magnitude, and you have levee breaks, water pours in to that lower lying land area. And because of where the Delta is situated, where that water pours in from is the Pacific Ocean. And what you'll see next is a model of salinity, blue being freshwater, red being salty water. So as all this water rushes into the low-lying areas, it pulls salt in. This is after 1 day. This is after the 2nd day, the 3rd day, 4th day, the 5th day. And as anyone that has eaten a cucumber and eaten a pickle knows, once you've gone to pickle, it's tough to go back to cucumber. The same is true for the Delta. And once the water is in, once the salt water is in there, it's salt water.
May the clerk put that on the record, please?
Oh, we'll make sure it's in the minutes.
Yeah, please.
We'll get a bumper sticker for every.
That's the pickle puts the P in DCP, right? So what that means is that Delta is not really good for drinking water for a little while, right? So the anticipation of a certain number of levee breaks, and in the benefit cost analysis, the Berkeley Research Group, based on Delta seismic projections, assumes 50 levee breaks. So export disruption in an estimate, that means how many days they would be unable to export water south of Delta is just a few days to about 15 months, with a 203-day average, on top of which, even once you fix everything and get all the water right back in the place where the water is supposed to be, you still have a few extra days, up to a third of a year, of Delta recovery time, and that's really a water quality issue. So again, this is another reason why Delta Conveyance Project is considered an insurance policy. It's really against the risk of supply interruptions due to seismic activity on the Delta. But if you're moving water from north of the Delta, under the Delta, and you don't have to put up with any pickles, then you don't have to interrupt your supply as long. Provided there's other risks, of course, all along the 400-ish miles of the California aqueduct. But for the Delta itself, the 50 levee breaches and 20 islands flooded, the DCP is engineered to withstand this 500-year seismic event. So even in a serious shake, you're still getting water through the tunnel, under the Delta, to export south to us. Now, they put this on a spectrum in the analysis, assuming on the far left that you're running just at health and safety levels of DCP exports or Delta exports, small amount of benefits, all the way to full bore. 6,000 CFS, pumping water from the Sacramento, full capacity, $500 billion of benefits based on the complicated math across all the scenarios. They landed on just under $1 billion in benefits. But those worth a lot, right? When those things occur, it's worth a lot of money. It's worth more than money to have fresh water in those periods of time. So some of the other benefits that aren't valued explicitly in the analysis are conservation of groundwater resources. And this is good for SGMA compliance. It's good for drought resilience. It's good even for reduced pumping costs, because the more water you leave in the ground, the higher the water level, the less power it takes to lift that water out of the ground. Reduced redundancy in delta conveyance would help. This is an example of the kind of short-term operational enhancements that the DCP would provide. If the DCP had been in place just this year alone, we could have gotten an additional 941,000 acre feet, almost 1 million acre feet. So if you think back to the beginning of the presentation, average exports out of the Delta are 2.5 million. Max is 4.1 million. We could have gotten an extra million, almost acre feet a year. Acre feet just this year in the first 6 months of this year at the DCP. Been in place today. That benefit's not valued explicitly. There's a community benefit program. Some portions of the community benefit program are included in the costs because they have identifiable numbers. But some of the other programs, enhancing public safety, improving water and air quality, developing educational programs, and recreational facilities, those are benefits they're side benefits of the DCP happening that were not valued in the analysis. So what the DCP itself looks like, as a reminder, is 2 inlets, 2 intakes on the Sacramento north of the Delta. Each has a capacity of 3,000 cubic feet per second, 45 miles of 36-foot internal diameter single tunnel at 100 to 130 feet below ground. Director McMillan, Director Tebow, and I got a driving tour. It was almost as warm as it was here today before we were up there. We saw a lot of empty lots where the tour guide was like, now, if you can imagine, you look out at that lot, and there's grass, it's just like, California dead wheat blowing in the wind. He's like, imagine 150 feet below that parcel of land, there's a huge pumping plant. We're like, okay, great. Feel it. The majority of the costs, 67, almost 70% of the cost of the program are building these things that mostly you're not going to see. So the intakes, specialized fish screens to ensure that they're like passive receivers of water that don't disrupt habitat. A $3.2 billion pumping plant. Tunnels and shafts, this is the big ticket item, $6.4 billion. I hope that they offer tours of the tunnel boring machine that I'm still working when this thing is drilling. But there is a 30% contingency it includes a 30% contingency on construction, which is about $3.5 billion. And then there are other costs, which include land acquisition, environmental mitigation, power, a settlement with Contra Costa at about $1.8 billion. Environmental mitigation costs. Again, these are things coming out of the EIR, tribal monitoring, habitat mitigation. Those are just shy of $1 billion. The community benefits program that I mentioned earlier really has 2 parts. It's included in a construction portion because the construction is the large impact both in the Delta, once the tunnel's underground, there are still portions of the intake structures and the access shafts that get down into the tunnel that will be permanently disrupted. But a lot of the disruption is during that 15-year construction period and really during a 7-year portion of that 15-year period. But they're developing a community, so that's why it's charged to construction. They're developing a community fund to preserve cultural, historical, recreational activities. And they've done a ton of outreach. One of the people on the tour that we went on was involved in, or is involved in a lot of these outreach events. And they're doing what seemed to me like a really, really good job of asking the communities, at least those that will talk to them within those communities, of what it is that those communities need and trying to provide that as a part of the mitigation for the parts of this project that, as Jennifer was talking about, can't just be paid for, right? And then they're also having an economic development program. This slide is up here, the O&M cost, really just to demonstrate that they're including O&M because large projects don't always do that. And it strikes, Dan and I were having this conversation too, always strikes us as a little shady when people don't include the O&M costs. But it gives you a sense of the scale on this also. Almost $53 million a year in O&M costs. It's a pretty penny itself. And then remaining environmental impacts. They identified 223 environmental and socioeconomic impacts that were significant, and only 8 of those were significant and unavoidable. Some of those, 4 of those were non-quantifiable. 4 of those were quantifiable, and these are the ones that I said would be permanent. So lost agricultural land. Then some of the other ones are construction-related air quality, noise, and transportation impacts. I mean, there's someone on this team who went through different stretches of roads and calculated how many fewer lanes were going to contribute to how many more cars and how much longer it was going to take people to get to work. And that all goes into traffic-related impacts. Not going to get into a ton of detail on sensitivity analyses. That's in Appendix C for those that are interested. But they ran 5 scenarios and really just wanted to talk about how the scenario they chose, this 2070 scenario of 1.8 feet of sea level rise, is kind of the Goldilocks. They had 2 scenarios that were based on climate impacts in 2040. But considering that the project's not going to be up and running until 2045, they thought like, well, we're already going to be there by the time we get to where the project is. And then some of the more extreme project or projections of climate impacts had such a small likelihood. So if you remember earlier in the presentation, I said that 1.8 feet of sea level rise had a 66% likelihood of occurrence. Some of the higher range, so 3.5 feet of sea level rise has a 0.05% likelihood of occurrence. So the authors thought, it seems a little extreme to use that as the basis for climate planning. And out of those sensitivity analyses, the benefits range from $26 to $45 billion. The ratios, as I said before, from 1.5 to 2.6. And the point being that even in the most modest scenarios, benefits are greater than the costs. And really the way that I think about this, and as one of the authors told me when we were at Aqua, this came out about a week after we were at Aqua. So I went on the 5K fun run with one of the authors. And I was like, man, come on, you gotta tell us. He's like, well, what I'll tell you is that the greater the impacts of climate change, the greater the benefits of DCP. And that, I think, is the big takeaway. That and that the cost of the water after you do all of this complicated math is $1,327 an acre foot, which is pretty good. That's what we will be paying wholesale metropolitan water within 2 years, next year. How it compares to the cost of recycled water or ocean desal is $2,000, $2,500 an acre foot. Pure water, $3,000, $3,500, $3,800, $4,000 an acre foot. So the cost of the DCP really, for the amount of water that we get And where we are in the state water project dependent area of metropolitan, and metropolitan is 80 to 85% dependent on the state water project. And the Colorado River makes up less than 20% of its water supply. You know, it really is a lot of bang for the buck. And again, it's really that the DCP helps maintain the current reliability of the state water project, staves off further reliability decay. And one of the other projects you hear a lot about, a little bit less than we did maybe a few years ago, but you still hear a lot about is stormwater capture. And as RGM likes to say, this is the biggest stormwater capture probably in the country, certainly the biggest stormwater capture in the state. People refer to it as the big gulp little sip project, meaning that when water is available, you can drink a whole ton of it. I remember sitting in this room at a purveyor meeting in 2017, 2017, when we started to get rain after the drought. And Eric Berg, who's the manager of water resources at the time, would show these presentations, including, I think that's where the video came from, of the salinity going into the Delta. And based on the 8 or 9 atmospheric rivers we had in the winter of 17, we had 3 Lake Oroville's go out the Golden Gate Bridge to the Pacific Ocean. That's a lot of water. If we can gulp a little bit of that water through the DCP and help stave off some of the impacts that we had during the 2015 and the 2022 drought, that's what the DCP, in addition to offering hedging against the reliability decay, that's one of the things that it also does. Again, because the state water project was built to operate off assumptions of 20th century, mid 20th century hydrology. We have a different hydrology. We need a different way of operating. State's largest water supply project. So a couple more and I'll wrap up. State water project, EWR issues this delivery capability report. The reason I'm including this is because it came out in July and it used a lot of the same models that were available to the Berkeley Research Group that did the benefit cost analysis. And really, some of the information in here drives home the point that substantial reductions in the state water project delivery capability are bound to happen if little or if no or insufficient action is taken. Some of those effects are already in motion. We estimate an average annual delivery of table A water in 2043. That's as far as the delivery capability report goes. It looks out 20 years. Is 13 to 22% lower than under existing conditions. If you think back to one of the first slides I showed of that bar of reduced Delta exports, already anticipating that happening before the project even gets started, let alone in the 2070 that the analysis looked at. So this is a quote out of here that multiple, as you know, a lot of these are based on regulatory restrictions, that multiple objectives converge in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta to protect a fragile ecosystem, to support Delta recreation and farming, and to provide water for agriculture and urban needs throughout West California. The reason I included this is because this is just another thing that has changed. Because in this list of 3 objectives, the idea of protecting a fragile ecosystem was not part of what the project was built for. And we can argue about whether it should have been part of the reason that the project was built in the first place. But today, it's one of the reasons that people look to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta as a place of unique habitat like nowhere else in the world. And that protecting that is important. And because of that, it's similar to how we need to change the operation of the Delta because of the weather patterns and hydrology having changed. Cultural values are also different than they were 70 years ago when the project first came online. So some of these, a lot of the regulatory requirements imposed by the state and the feds are put in place to fulfill that first objective of protecting a fragile ecosystem. Smelt, spring and winter run, Chinook, salmon. And as an example, I talked about this a little bit earlier about a missed opportunity. We had 113% of average snowpack this year, but we had a 40% allocation on the State Water Project. And that was because of the presence of protected fish near the pumps in the south of the Delta. And so that's another thing that the DCP provides is an alternate way of getting water. In this year, that delta between 40 and 130, some of that could have come through the tunnel and let the fish stay near the pumps. Fish exports, this has been a big thing. This is a comparison of initial and final allocations on the State Water Project over the last 30 years. The blue to the left. So the Judge Wanger decision, the Wanger ruling on Delta smelts considered a watershed, unintended, I suppose, moment in DCP or State Water Project operations. If you look at the difference between the average allocations before and after this decision, it's almost, the average allocation is almost half what it was before these regulations went into place.
Which year was it that they started breeding them and putting them back in the river?
I don't know.
Because maybe that might play into it. They put them right by the pumps, of course there's fish by the pumps.
This is Delta smelt, not salmon.
Okay. So again, as it talks about, as we've talked about earlier, here is that climate conditions changing already by 2043, let alone by 2070, let alone by 2100 or 2145. Rising sea levels. And in this report, DCP is not modeled as a solution, but it would provide a hedge against the risks that are identified in this report and that we're already starting to see. So next steps for Calleguas, we have identified in the strategic plan to one of our main objectives under the priority of providing regional leadership is to support the Delta conveyance. And so based on the really positive analysis coming out of the benefit cost analysis, staff is looking to build coalitions with other like-minded state water contractors in the region of Ventura County and other member agencies that are interested in supporting this project.
Ian?
Yes.
Can you just go back one slide? I didn't see the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, I ran through it because it was stuff that I had
Thank you. No,
touched on.
I wanted to see the bottom line.
Okay, so that's it. In a nutshell. So happy to answer questions now or as they occur to you. These documents are readily available. We can get them delivered to you.
Any questions? Seems to me it's a little dangerous since I haven't read it. And you've gone through it or so thoroughly. And I'm gonna ask a dangerous question anyway. And, you went earlier through the impact on users. And you also went through what the status is of the benefiting economy was in terms of the world. So I was just kind of curious. I know it's such a matrix. It makes my head spin, but I'm just trying to figure out, you just kind of wonder if there's a GDP track to that benefit area through all of this, because it seems like there were kind of indicators, but then the other side of it is that there's so many other overriding benefits that I think it kind of buries it. So I'm not sure where I can ask you a question other than, has anybody looked at GDP for that benefit area?
So in the benefit area, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think my answer would be that the benefit area is coterminous with the State Water Project service area. So it's that the service area of all the 29 state water contractors. That's the GDP that gets rolled up into being the $2.3 trillion a year economy and the 8th largest economy in the world. So
if you go out to 2043 or 2045, you got a box there at least. Is there a look?
What would the GDP be with or without?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would be very interested in that answer. I will see if someone has done that.
And I will tell you that they still are looking to refine this whole project even more. And of course, to go forward, they're asking Met to come up with another 140 million. And we'll make that decision in December. And the reason is because they've been sued, so they can't go out and bond and get the money they need to continue doing this administrative work. But Metropolitan, we had filed a protest. We think we're owed $160 million in overbilling. And we're not the only state water project that does that. The difficulty is they just don't, okay, we agree with you, here's your money back. They would have to go back to some of the state water contractors and get some of that money and bring. So it's not an easy thing to get our money back, at least in whole. So we're asking, okay, is there some type of credit? Is for us to now put down 140 million extra. What about these back payments that we believe we are owed? So they're working to settle all the other protests with the other state water contractors to get them settled. Then they're going to focus on ours at the very end. So that's kind of what we're waiting for. The Bay Delta Ad Hoc Committee is like, okay, you know, where are we? And if we make that decision, we do not have to pay the 140 million until the end of 2025. Because we've already prepaid some of the money up front. So that's kind of where we're sit right now.
And the 140 million would help finish out the permitting phase.
Because we have to pay 47.2% of the overall project. That's our ratio that we pay for. And that would be the 140 million going forward.
And then the big decision about the big investment would be 2026, 2027 for the 2029 contract.
It's only been, what, 60 years?
Yeah.
To me, it feels like eternity. I can remember when, Dad used to be all excited about down in the River project. Not all of that got done. Because for fear of stalling the whole thing. It's supposed to, just part of it get done.
Yeah, the peripheral canal under Jerry Brown's first tenure as governor was voted down by the public on July 8th of 1982. I was 4 days old. In one way, the backdrop of my life. All right.
Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Appreciate it. Okay, on to the general counsel report.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. I've been working with the general manager on yielding agreement, working with the manager of resources on contracts regarding the turnkey turf transformation project, purveyor funding assistance agreements. And I also reviewed the CEQA resolution and supporting authority that were on tonight's agenda. Staff and the consultant did a fantastic job, and I did a final pass through to match them up against the CEQA guidelines to make sure that everything was current and no citations had changed, that kind of thing. I've did some brief work with the emergency response coordinator regarding implementing the workplace violence prevention program into district agreements. I continue to coordinate with special counsel on groundwater and construction issues. And on Friday at 4:15, before the 3-day weekend, I attended a legal affairs committee meeting regarding the amendment of the aqua bylaws. We didn't have to attend the meeting. They said, if you can't attend at 4:15 before the holiday weekend, we'll excuse your absence. But enough of a quorum of the legal affairs committee showed up, and we're supposed to provide input anytime they amend the aqua bylaws. And the amendments were not really substantive. They were just kind of procedural issues as to how how aqua conducts its business. So that's it for now, for tonight.
Wow. Thank you. It's so bad that I didn't ask for, as legal looked at this CEQA.
Legal looks at the whole board packet before it goes out.
We should ask. Okay. Board of Directors report, committee meeting report.
There were no committee meetings since the last board meeting.
Okay, so then we'll go on to ancillary duties. Aqua Region 8 Director, always reported on the previous thing, so there's no report there. Report of Aqua Joint Powers Insurance Authority, nothing new there. Report of Association of Water Agencies of Ventura County.
North, there was an executive committee meeting yesterday that I wasn't able to attend. They have the board meeting tomorrow. And I will be attending.
Very good. Fox Canyon.
Nothing new to report. There has not been a meeting.
Okay, and Metropolitan Water District.
Yes, and this covers actually more than 2 weeks from our last board meeting, since I missed the previous board meeting, having been at a Westlands ribbon cutting ceremony. Anyway, on August 14th, we attended a direct briefing on water supplies. On 15th, the 16th, the Field Bay workshop on water climate change. August 18th to the 20th, MWD board and committee meetings. On August 22nd, the Westlands Water District ribbon cutting, a new recharge basin in Calleguas. August 26th, ad hoc committee on Bay Delta via Zoom. August 26th to the 28th, MWD committee meetings and Camp for Water workshop. And September 4th, direct briefing on climate change.
Very good. Again, in Ventura County, LAFCO.
There hasn't been a LAFCO meeting yet. I believe there's one in 2 weeks.
Okay. Then BCERA is not, no report there. Ventura County Special Districts is not here. So we'll go on to the individual. So, you want to start that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the, since the last board meeting on the 25th, I completed the Calleguas confidentiality training. On the 26th, I went back and watched some of the Metropolitan board meetings that I missed. That one, on the 26th, it was a long one. It was about an hour of public comment, and that's a closed session. Jack, you probably really enjoyed that.
They're getting longer and longer.
Yeah. On the 27th, I watched the Met Special Board Executive Committee meeting. On the 28th, was the Chamber of Commerce Legislative Affairs Committee. And 29th, I went back and watched the MWD Met Subcommittee meeting on long-term planning. And I think. Oh, yesterday was the Calleguas Las Virgenes PFA meeting and tonight's board meeting.
Very good. Richard Millen.
August the 10th, I did the cybersecurity training on confidentiality. August the 13th, the CSD workshop on demystifying LAFCOs. August the 14th, Aqua 101. August the 16th, the CSDA Fiscal Committee, and also the MWD Calleguas Strategy Team meeting. On August the 21st, the Aqua Region 8 event. August the 23rd, the Aqua Communications Committee. August the 24th, a pre-planning meeting for our upcoming CRA Hoover Tour. On September the 3rd, the Calleguas Las Virgenes Financial Authority meeting and tonight's board meeting.
Big letters.
Joint Powers meeting yesterday and today's.
August 27th, I zoomed in on the general manager speaking at the Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce Legislative Roundtable. On the 28th, we went to each of the Aqua quarterly committee meetings, with the exception of the ag committee, I guess. On September 3rd, the PFA meeting, and I stayed there a little bit for the WD presentation and tonight's board meeting. So regarding upcoming meetings.
They're in the packet. I don't have anything to add this time.
Okay. As for any future agenda items. Okay, information items, written communication.
Charlotte, is anything you want to add in terms of context for these two items?
I don't think so unless there are any questions from the directors. Packet and have to answer questions.
Any questions on the communication? Okay, I haven't heard of any closed session.
Nope.
Oh, you didn't? No, no closed session tonight.
Okay, well, let's adjourn. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Where are we going for bids